Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Test Tube Plus today. I am Trace. This is episode 3 of 5 in our series on alternative energy sources. Renewable energy! It's the best. I'm here with my buddy Julian Hugan, fellow host on D-News, our science show here at Discovery. And we're talking a little bit about fusion today, because we are pro-nuclear power. It is the best choice we have right now that we can actually use, right?
In my opinion, yes.
So there are two major ways to create nuclear energy: fusion and fission.
Right.
Which one you want to tackle?
I'll talk about fission.
Okay, I'll get fusion.
It's a good
then.
place to start. Fission is where we're at right now. You can achieve fission by taking very heavy elements that are radioactive, meaning that they're unstable. They're trying to find a balance between protons and neutrons that gets them at a stable level. So occasionally they'll release other particles. You bombard them with a neutron, they split, and from the reaction, from E equals mc squared, their mass is slightly less, so they release huge amounts of energy from very little amounts of actual material. So that is what our nuclear reactors use right now. In the United States, primarily we use light water reactors that use slightly enriched uranium-235. So slightly enriched uranium, meaning it's just a little bit uranium-235, mostly uranium-238. Splits the U-235, you get other radioactive stuff and all this energy. But the end goal, though, really, of energy science and nuclear power is going to be fusion.
Yeah, fusion is awesome. So to use where he started, if fission uses very heavy elements that are at the at one end of the periodic table and they smash something into them so that they split apart, fusion uses small light elements, hydrogen, the lightest element, and smashes them into each other to create slightly heavier elements using the same E equals mc squared idea, where you're conserving all of this information so that you can get all of this energy. Fusion is something we haven't figured out yet.
No, not here on Earth, and not in a way that is sustainable.
Right.
It's a very pie-in-the-sky idea. But if we can figure it out, it's going to be pretty much the end of our energy woes. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe.
Yes.
It's the simplest. It's the easiest to find. Ideally, at some point we're going to use hydrogen 2 and 3 that we could maybe even mine from the moon, but that's
a
way
whole
out
other
there.
thing, man. But
that's a whole
there.
other
I love
thing.
It. I love it.
It's a whole other thing. But the point is, we're never going to run out. Right now, in the crust of the Earth, we think we have, at present rates we're using it, about another 230 years worth of uranium. And if we pull it out from the salt water, there's like 0.003 parts per million in seawater. So that's enough for another 60,000 years. So even though we have enough uranium to potentially last 60,000 years, it's still producing this radioactive waste. And even though I've defended that earlier, it's not the end game. On the other hand, though,
hydrogen,
when you fuse together hydrogen, you're not really getting any radioactive material. Now, bombarding it with neutrons would probably leave the surrounding reactor radioactive. But if you stop the bombardment, you only have radioactivity at that reactor for about another 50 to 100 years.
Right. And the point is, fusion also is more efficient than fission. Fusion generates 3 to 4 times the energy that fission does right now. So imagine putting in the same amount of energy and getting out 4 times more energy. Fusion primarily uses actually isotopes of hydrogen, deuterium, tritium, and it's way safer, as for the reasons that Julian just listed, that if you stop the reaction, you stop the danger from that reaction. So if something goes wrong, you just kind of stop everything. The hydrogen is done.
Yep.
And nothing is fusing anymore. It's over.
You just pull the plug. There's no risk of that overheating like you have with our fission reactors.
So the reason we don't have fusion right now, Julian?
The biggest hurdle to it is it takes more energy to get a fusion reaction going than it puts out. So it's not really worth it. To get these hydrogen atoms to fuse together, you have to get them to overcome their electromagnetic repulsion of each other. And if you're in somewhere with a high temperature, high pressure, like, say, the core of a star, that's possible. Replicating those circumstances on Earth, though, is something that we haven't been able to do in a way that's worth it yet, sustainable and economical. And something
right now we're putting in more than we're getting out.
Correct.
So it's not worth it.
While at the same time, energy from fission is one of the cheapest cheapest energy sources.
Right.
So
we're just smashing things into other things and saying, look, energy, great.
Piece
awesome.
of cake, right?
Easy.
So right now, that's the stopgap. But I would love if the public had a rekindled interest in nuclear power, because then we could have these stopgaps that would prevent more CO2 from getting in the atmosphere, and at the same time develop nuclear fusion and be on our way to total energy security.
Let me just be clear. Nuclear power seems complicated, but it's actually fairly easy now that we've figured it out. There's this guy, his name is David Hahn. He's a Boy Scout. He was from my home state of Michigan. And in 1994, when he was 17, he made a nuclear breeder reactor in his mom's garden shed.
How?
He took americurium from smoke detectors. That's the thing that makes your smoke detector detect the smoke. He took thorium from camping lanterns. He took radium from old clocks, the things in clocks from the early 20th century that made the hands glow and the numbers glow. It was a paint. And inside of that paint was radium, which is radioactive. And so literally you were looking at a clock that was glowing radiation into you. And people are really concerned about other things that are crazy in their lives. And tritium from gun sights, which people also use all the time. Lead and lithium from batteries and from other sources, pretty common actually.
Right.
And he took all of these things and he attempted to create a breeder reactor, which is a reactor that produces energy that it can then use as material to produce more energy.
Yeah.
And he didn't succeed in creating the reactor entirely, but he used so much of the nuclear energy and used a Bunsen burner to make things, and it was very low budget. But he did it so well that he was able to detect radiation when he was on his block in the car with his Geiger counter. So he dismantled the whole thing, he buried a lot of it, and he kept some of it in his trunk until he got pulled over, and he said to the police, "No, you should probably not look in my trunk." And then the Nuclear Regulatory Commission got involved.
Exactly what the police want to hear, right?
Right.
No, don't look at the trunk. It's just a nuclear
that's
reactor.
fine. It's nuclear
Don't
stuff.
worry
Don't worry
it.
about it. You won't get it. Anyway, so this kid was able to create this system, and yes, it didn't work entirely, but those things are just part of nature. It's out there in nature, and we just have to know how to make it work.
People freak out about the radioactive byproducts of nuclear power all the time, but remember, it's still using uranium, which is a radioactive element that's out there in nature already. I hate this idea that if it's not natural, or if it's natural, it's safe. That's not necessarily true at all. If it's handled correctly, it's safe.
Right.
That's the big difference. If you can do something smart and safely and with the right countermeasures to protect yourself, we can do nuclear power safely. We can store the byproducts safely. It just takes forethought and effort.
So the dream, though, when it comes to nuclear fusion or fission, is actually cold fusion, which is basically saying, hey, sun, I can do one better. I can do this at room temperature. And again, room temperature is relative. The sun is millions of degrees. Cold fusion, which you've probably heard in science fiction movies, is essentially fusion at a temperature that's manageable. A fusion that they call room temperature, or a temperature less akin to solar temperatures.
Compared to millions of degrees, 20
Right.
Celsius is pretty
Yeah,
tame.
even thousands Celsius is pretty tame.
Pretty doable.
So that's the dream, but there's something in between what we're doing now and cold fusion, and that is the thorium reactor, which I know is one of your personal favorite things. So a thorium reactor we've actually been asked to talk about by commenters, so here you go, commenters. Thorium.
Thorium is amazing. Thorium is a potential nuclear fuel that hasn't been used because it could be used in molten salts. So you get salt really, really hot, a couple hundred degrees Celsius. It becomes a liquid, and it can be used to cool the reactor. And if the reactor, gets too cold and the salt just freezes up and reaction stops, or if it gets too hot, you can have another salt plug that melts, drains all the fissile material away, and it's safe. So a thorium reactor is potentially self-regulating, which is amazing.
That's amazing.
It breeds its own fuel. If you hit it with a neutron after, a few days or a couple weeks, it turns into uranium-233, which you can split and create energy from. And on top of that, there's tons and tons of thorium in the Earth's crust. It's much more abundant than uranium. Uranium in the Earth's crust will last us about another 230 years at present rates, maybe 60,000 years if we want to pull it from salt water. But thorium could easily meet energy demands for possibly up to 10,000 years. We've just got to figure out how to keep the salt from corroding the insides of the reactor. So it's a very small hurdle for thorium. In fact, China wants to develop a thorium reactor in the next 25 years.
Wow, that's soon.
That is soon.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
And if they do that, China obviously has a big problem with pollution. They're investing heavily in nuclear power. If they master thorium, you can bet you're going to start seeing thorium reactors all around the world. That would be an amazing future. Not the end-all, be-all of nuclear, because I still believe it's fusion, but I would love to see a thorium reactor at some point in my lifetime.
And thorium comes from, it's a waste product of things that we're already doing, like heavy metal mining.
Correct.
And that's not like heavy metal, like...
Yeah,
we're
you just dig
talking
down
like,
and you find Slayer.
Like literally heavy metal. It's like Slipknot mining. Is that heavy metal? I don't know anything about heavy metal.
I don't think so.
So nuclear, it's not as scary, but it's definitely our best hope for future alternative energy.
Right.
And if we don't fix this problem, we're kind of screwed. Because we're just going to keep dumping 1,500 million tons of CO2 into the atmosphere every year until we do something else.
Right. I'll end it this way. You don't ever get something for nothing in energy production. Every method, every alternative energy has some cost in there you're going to have to deal with. So what compromise are you most okay with making?
Let us know down in the comments how you feel about this topic on nuclear energy, and also make sure you come talk to us over on Twitter. If you have questions or comments, you can find Julian at jhug00. You can find me at Trace Dominguez. Thanks for watching Test 2 Plus, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for being on, Julian.
Thank you for having me, Trace.
Yay, energy. We've got it.